Hi, I'm Joe Feeks, editor of Poultry Health Today, and with me is Manuel Da Costa. He is Associate Director of Outcomes Research at Zoetis. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
The poultry industry is obviously very concerned about Salmonella. In the broiler breeder flock, they pretty much vaccinate routinely and have been for quite some time. But now we're seeing a huge uptick in the amount of broiler vaccination for Salmonella. In fact, I saw a statistic the other day that since 2015, it's gone up around 6,000%, which is mind-boggling. What's driving that?
That's a very good point. Broiler breeders, as you mentioned, they have been on Salmonella vaccination programs for a long time. But the trends for the broilers is a very recent thing, and that pertains with a specific type of vaccine, which is a live Salmonella vaccines. I think what brought the need for usage of those vaccines was a better management of Salmonella, for sure. But when FSIS a few years ago enacted the new plant standards, where plants start to being categorized, more regulatory measures, so poultry companies comply with better Salmonella performance, that created an extra pressure, let's say, on the poultry industry that led the decision makers to evaluate new strategies to control Salmonella. So I see that's where the live Salmonella vaccination fits into the equation. And as you mentioned, since 2015, approximately, there is a rise, a continuous rise of usage of live Salmonella vaccination as a strategy to reduce Salmonella in broilers and not in breeders.
But despite the huge increase that we've seen over the past 3 years, most poultry companies are not vaccinating broilers for Salmonella. How do you go about making that decision?
So Salmonella, when you look, it's a common place for most of the disease and issues in poultry. You need to have an integrated approach. So when a company looks to the Salmonella control, it's going to look for the basis of the Salmonella control is on the breeders, as you mentioned initially. But then there's another series of steps that need to be accounted for this control. So maybe some of the companies are taking some initiatives on some other sides that they don't feel that there's a need for adding the extra cost of vaccinating on top of those measures. However, some of these companies, despite of the steps that they take to control Salmonella, sometimes you see a high load of Salmonella coming into the plant. You see, for instance, more human important serotypes coming into the plant. So there's where the vaccines can step in and help the producers to reduce that load coming into the plant, and also control some of the serotypes that are more problematic in terms of foodborne disease.
Now, you use the word serotype to describe the different Salmonellas. Are they basically variations of the same thing, or are they unique pathogens?
So when you look to Salmonella, you have different groups. They're just classified based on the antigen. So you have various groups based on the O antigen, and then depending on the other characteristics, you can within those groups you can serotype. So basically, you have an umbrella. That's your group, and then under that you're going to have different serotypes that have different characteristics of each strain.
So I would imagine if you want to get the broadest Salmonella protection and the biggest bang for the buck, if you're going to be investing in a vaccine, that cross protection would be very important.
Yes, it is. So when you look for a vaccine candidate for Salmonella, you will want to find a strain that shares the most antigens with the other serotypes. And Salmonella typhimurium, if you look to the composition of that bacterial strain, you will find that it has a lot of shared antigens with various serotypes that are concerned for humans. But also, immunity to Salmonella is not that straightforward. Sometimes you will find some serotypes that do not have any antigen that is shared with the vaccine, and when you vaccinate birds, you'll still see a response to that, and we believe that's mostly related with a non-specific immunity, the cellular-based immunity that results in a reduction of the serotypes. So it's not a very straightforward correlation, in my opinion.
Now, you wanted to take a closer look at that. I understand that you recently did a study with a live ST vaccine for Salmonella. What was the purpose of that study, and what did you find?
So it's actually a set of studies that we have done. Our objective was to, base that vaccination program for broilers with a live Salmonella typhimurium, and then based on the key serotypes that we believe are important for the poultry industry, we wanted to see if, when you vaccinate those birds, can we have a protection against those key serotypes? And we approached that in two different ways. One was using an early challenge model. We get asked quite a bit from our colleagues in the poultry industry if the vaccine is effective against early challenges.
So when you say early challenge, specifically what kind of time frame?
It can be challenges that are brought along from the breeders on the vertical transmission, or early exposure, first week of age. On these specific trials, we did challenge around 4 or 5 days. We do have other trials that we evaluate vertical transmission. There's also another advantage of using a live vaccine at day of age, and that is especially important on the early models, is that broiler chicks are really susceptible for Salmonella colonization during that hatchery first days in the farm period. So if you can populate those birds with a vaccine, a live vaccine, what you'll be doing is you're going to create a competitive exclusion with wild types. So that's another route where the vaccines can become handy and kind of exclude the wild types, while at the same time they trigger immunity to create a response that's going to last for the bird's life.
So is there a best time to vaccinate for Salmonella for broilers?
What we advise is to vaccinate right off the bat at the hatchery, spray vaccinate those birds, and then you will want to come back and give a field boost at 14 days. And that should give you a protection down to the end of your production cycle.
And if you're vaccinating for broilers, does that take any pressure off of the broiler breeder manager? Can they cut back on their side as a result, or are you just really trying to increase the level of overall protection?
Broiler breeder Salmonella programs are key when you try to control for Salmonella. So you will want to have the strongest breeder program that you have by using killed vaccines. You can use autogenous. You do a priming with a live vaccine, and you can use killed vaccine, autogenous, as in a way to reduce the Salmonella in your breeders and also transfer maternal immunity to your progeny to actually face those very first day challenges as well. So I wouldn't take my coins from the breeders.
Were you surprised by any of the results in this study?
No, so it was really interesting. What we observed was we tested for Salmonella enteritidis and also Salmonella Kentucky over the first 2-3 weeks using a 4 or 5 day. And we detect that when you use vaccines, you tended to reduce the load of those serotypes. So it was really encouraging to see that in such a short period of time, where the vaccine doesn't have, to be honest, much room to respond, we were still able to detect a reduction in the Salmonella load. When we looked to the later challenges, around 34, 35 day, we got a really good cross protection against Group Cs. We evaluate for Kentucky, which is not that important for humans, but is really important for poultry companies when it comes to the standards. We also got a a good reduction of the loads in cases of Salmonella infantis challenge birds. And we tested a Hallerberg, which is one of the major serotypes that concerns human health. We were able to show reduction in Salmonella load and prevalence in samples that we took from the bird, but also from the environment.
Now, the Salmonella itself doesn't harm the bird. It can certainly threaten humans, but it doesn't harm the bird. But is there any performance benefit to vaccinating for Salmonella?
We have seen, as you said, Salmonella theoretically doesn't harm the birds, but what we have found on our control studies, but also in our field trials, is that when you vaccinate birds, you tend to see a marginal improvement in feed conversion. To be honest, I think there's two explanations for that. One is that I've seen that when you challenge or when you have a high Salmonella challenge, even though that they are not pathogenic to the birds, they can do harm performance of the birds. So maybe you're cutting that, let's call it subclinical effect of Salmonella. The other one is that the live Salmonella vaccine is conditioning the overall gut environment and make the bird more efficient. But I've never tested this hypothesis, but we do see that trial after trial we get 2 feed conversion points on the birds that are vaccinated.